at slchamber.com. That's slchamber.com.
You trust us for news and information in your car. Now trust us at home. KSL News Radio has you covered, keeping you informed on the latest breaking news, weather, traffic, sports, and more. Listen on your Amazon Echo or Google Home device. Just say, Alexa, open KSL News Radio. Or listen on the KSL News Radio Listen app. Text the word app to 57500. KSL News Radio. We have you covered.
Traffic and weather together. It's brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Ricky?
We do have a nice drive in progress on your Salt Lake County freeways. No accidents, no delays. One accident reported in Utah County. It's at I-15 near Center Street in Santaquin. Thriller is back. See your favorite characters in the smash hit Halloween performance this fall. Buy now, scare later. Tickets to Thriller are on sale now at odysseydance.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
And the weather is changing. We're already seeing that. The clouds have moved in. Today's high 82 degrees, but tomorrow you can expect temperatures to drop out. The high tomorrow 62. And right now in downtown Salt Lake City, mostly cloudy, 75 degrees.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
KSL News Radio, I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. Great Salt Lake has dropped almost 3 feet since May, and that's half a foot more than it normally drops during the summer. The Deputy Great Salt Lake Commissioner, Tim Davis, says you can thank the long and hot summer for that.
I see this as just a call to action. We can't take our foot off the pedal. We have to make sure that we're working with everybody in the basin to get more water to the lake.
The water has been flowing into the lake's north arm. It's brought the levels in both arms closer. The Great Salt Lake today is more than 3 feet higher than its record low 2 years ago, but almost 6 feet below what experts consider a healthy level. Our top national story this hour. The Biden administration has announced an additional $425 million in military aid for Ukraine. That announcement comes after President Biden spoke on the phone to Ukraine's President Zelensky. It comes as Ukraine has asked the U.S. to revise its policy on using American weapons. Ukraine is not allowed to use weapons supplied by the United States to hit targets inside Russia. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average now up 340 points on the day, while the NASDAQ is up 49. And our KSL weather. We're going to get close to a temperature record today, but then the bottom drops out tomorrow. That's next. KSL News Time 101.
We hope you have the right app on your phone for news. You probably have dozens.
But the KSL News Radio app, well, it makes our live stream super easy.
Plus, our talk shows are right there as podcast for your workday.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
If you're living with dry age-related macular degeneration or dry AMD, you may be at risk for developing geographic atrophy or GA. GA can be unpredictable and progress rapidly, leading to irreversible vision loss. Now there's something you can do to
slow it down and get it going slower.
Izervay is proven to slow GA progression.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Izervay or avacincaptad pagel is a prescription eye injection used to treat GA. Don't take it if you have an infection or active swelling in or around your eye. Izervay can cause eye infection, retinal detachment, or increased risk of wet AMD. Izervay may temporarily increase eye pressure. Your vision may be impaired after an eye injection or exam. Don't delay. Ask your doctor about Izervay today.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Visit Izervay.com. That's IZERVAY.com.
Many people worry they're not making the right investment choices inside their 401ks. Did you know that you might have a little-known opportunity to add some additional investment choices to your 401k and get the help and recommendations you've been looking for? This exciting feature is called a self-directed brokerage window. And the best part? The money still stays within your 401k. Learn how the trusted advisors at Capital Wealth may be able to expand your investment portfolio. To learn more, call or text the word VISIT to 801-877-9800 or go to CapitalWealth401k.com. Improving your 401k might mean the difference of retiring a few years earlier. Let's find out. Schedule your no-cost 15-minute consultation with the Capital Wealth team today. Call or text the word VISIT to 801-877-9800 or go to CapitalWealth401k.com. Advisory services offered through Capital Wealth Advisors, LLC, a state of Utah registered investment advisor.
In 2024, dating is a disaster. We've been ghosted, breadcrumbed, stuck in situationships. Hi, I'm Debbie. I'm Caitlin. Welcome to our new podcast, Dating at Her Age. Dating has been so dicey for us, we asked KSL, can we launch an all-new podcast about it?
People use these dating apps. You're not really dating when you're on the dating app.
Dating at Her Age, brought to you by Mountain Home Services. A new episode drops every Thursday on KSLNewsRadio.com.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. And here's Ricky Meese.
Still a quiet drive on the freeways, but we do have an accident in Weber County. This is 26th Street at Washington Boulevard. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
And partly cloudy skies expected for the rest of the day, a high of 82. Much colder tomorrow, though, with rain likely. Highs will stay in the 50s and 60s through the weekend. Right now, we're at 77 degrees. It's mostly cloudy. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
In America, we've come to expect a last-minute electoral jolt during the campaign season as everything winds down. Something to shift the political calculus just a little bit before we get to that first Tuesday of November. And we often refer to that as the October surprise. It's been a defining feature of presidential campaigns for several decades. And this year, we've seen a lot of things brewing out there. We've obviously had some storms that have impacted the southeast portion of the United States. We got winds swirling with war in the Middle East and Ukraine. But the big question we should think again about today is the big October surprise come and gone, or is it yet to be? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, everyone always likes to speculate on the October surprise. We've had a lot of things that have jolted and adjusted things during the course of this presidential cycle. I'm not sure we can handle more surprises, but we need to take a look at what is it that it impacts and how does that actually play out. Jeff Greenfield, of course, award-winning television journalist, author, and has a fantastic piece in Politico that the October surprise may be arriving shortly. And Jeff, welcome back to the show.
Nice to be back with you, Boyd.
All right, let's dive right on in. So let's kind of go a little historics first here in terms of the October surprise. How have we seen this play out in the past? And then we'll get to what things might look like with the remaining days in October this year.
Well, just think back to 2016 when FBI Director Comey announced that he was reopening the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. That was a jolt that, in the view of that campaign, probably they think it cost her the election because it was so close. But it's just one of many examples. You have in 1968, one I didn't write about, the Vietnam peace talks were scuttled because of the interjection of Richard Nixon's campaign. They did not want a peace deal to go through to help Hubert Humphrey. But you have in 1992 the special counsel Lawrence Walsh investigating the Iran-Contra affair re-indicted a former defense secretary, Caspar Weinberger, and in that re-indictment said that then Vice President George Bush knew a lot more about Iran-Contra than he'd let on. Now, Bush was the candidate for re-election in that campaign. That may well have had an impact. And in the 2000 election, just a few days before the election, a reporter discovered that 24 years earlier, George W. Bush, as a young man, was pulled over for drunk driving in Maine. Now, whether that had an impact or not, you don't know any way to measure it, but Karl Rove, who was Bush's chief strategist, thinks that is what cost George W. Bush the popular vote and may have cost him a few states. So it's not as though you can, by definition, you can't predict what might happen. It's just, as you pointed out, what's already happened that nobody would have predicted at the start of the campaign. The fact that the Democratic candidate for president is not Joe Biden was a pretty severe change in the dynamic. One thing I should note, and probably should have noted in the piece, is that because of early voting, if there is some kind of last-minute event, millions and millions of people will already have voted, which is a change from what the American political campaigns used to be. So you have to keep that in mind, too, as a possible mitigating factor.
Yeah, and I think that it's so fascinating to start playing that out. And we know ballots. We got ballots here in the state of Utah hitting mailboxes today and tomorrow, and on in. Other places like North Carolina are well underway. And so that has an interesting impact on it. I also think it's interesting, too, that often those who wait the longest to vote are probably those that are most undecided or still deciding whether or not they will vote. And so as you keep your eye on that, Jeff, from your unique perch and perspective, what else are you trying to keep your eye on in terms of, here's some things that may not necessarily be the big shocking surprise, but as you pointed out, may shape things?
The last minute, or not last minute, but in Kamala Harris's case, the late decision to hit more kinds of outlets, which they were not doing earlier in her campaign. Just today, Harris is going on Fox News with Bret Baier. She's also apparently realized that there are unconventional media outlets that have a huge impact in terms of the listeners, whether it's Joe Rogan or whether it's Charlemagne Lagarde or whether it's Call Her Daddy, not the kind of place that candidates in ages past might have gone, but the idea of trying to reach these low propensity voters. The general theory is people who are attuned to these kinds of outlets tend to be less politically engaged. Whether that will have any impact, whether or not, for instance, Trump's participation in these podcasts will gin up the bro vote, whether or not Kamala Harris can reclaim some of the erosion in the black community by going on black-oriented podcasts. This is a relatively new feature in campaigns, and dinosaurs like me, have to be very aware that Dan Rather isn't around anymore. Walter Cronkite's not around anymore, and that there are all these outlets that quite literally didn't exist a decade ago that could have a huge impact at the last minute.
Yeah, and it is when campaigns are saying we're going on a media blitz and there's no networks that are listed, it was definitely one of those that's different kind of moments. And I wanted to ask you, Jeff, because I'd love your perspective on this. A lot of these podcasters and these niche markets that they're going to, obviously, as you said, to get those low propensity folks, but they're also pretty friendly. And I actually think that in those moments, those are some opportunities that seem to be ripe with opportunities for gaffes because the candidate gets so comfortable. There's almost a little bit of crowd surfing that can go on. Does that become a risk, or does that become the October surprise that someone gets maybe too comfortable on one of those podcasts and says something that may have a bigger impact?
The one example that I'm not even sure it fits what you're asking, but at one point on a friendly outlet, Kamala Harris was asked, what would she be different? How would she be different from Biden? And her first answer was, well, she really wouldn't be. The Biden administration is not a popular incumbent administration, and you might choose that as an example. On the other hand, and I'm being very blunt with you here, Boyd, in the last several days, I have watched a lot of Donald Trump's appearances. He was at a town hall that Governor Noem was the inquisitor, not exactly a tough inquisitor. That's the town hall where he spent the last 30 minutes on stage kind of dancing. To his funless. Now, I think what I've learned at some expense in terms of education late in my political life is I'm not sure at this point that there is anything Donald Trump could do or say that would affect his base.
Right.
We've been going through 9 years of this, and Trump's opponents have been saying for 9, that's it, he's finished. At this point, I literally, if you said to me, well, what could it be? I'm at a loss for words. I think the more likely impact of a period on mostly friendly media is to encourage the undecideds or the non-voters. Oh, she's not so bad. It's an example like Howard Stern, who was extremely friendly to Harris, and he used to be. That's where Trump got famous in New York in the '80s. But now he's all in for Harris. So I think what we're saying is in an election where every measurement that we can make says this is very close, the idea of some untoward event that could radically shift large numbers of voters, I don't think it is as plausible as it used to be not that many years ago. But you know what? Having said that, I should say we've all got lessons in humility by making predictions that turned out to be wildly wrong. So I've got this radical notion, Boyd, that I'm going to wait till November, is it 5th? Yes. And see what voters. Bill Clinton had a great line that he often used when he would be asked, "What's this election about?" And he would say, "The voters will tell us." And more than most, I think that's where we are now. And it's I was actually thinking, all right, what could change this? One of the people who was asked by Politico in January, a bunch of us were asked about untoward events, and he suggested if we discovered life on outer space. There was some, and my feeling is no, because then the Republicans would attack that creature as an illegal alien, and the Democrats would say no, we want him as part of our. That's right. So I'm not sure even that would do it.
Oh my goodness, yeah, that's about where we are, I think, in all of this, and I do love that phrase. The voters will tell us as long as the voters show up, and that's the key for all of us. Jeff Greenfield, always so grateful for your time and attention and your tremendous insight. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Nice to be with you again, Ward. Bye-bye.
That's Jeff Greenfield. Love having him on, his experience over the years, and I do think he's on to something in terms of, a lot of this is going to be in the margins. It's going to be those undecided voters, those inactive voters, those folks who aren't high-propensity voters. But maybe something that's said on one of these outlets does spark them to get off the couch or to grab that ballot off the kitchen table and actually cast a vote. The question is, will something be said? Will something be done? Will there be an event that takes place that changes that movable middle, those undecideds, and those low propensity voters to actually engage? Now, I want you to think again about the last thing that Jeff Greenfield told us today. When asked about what this election is about, he quoted Bill Clinton, who said, "The voters will tell us." And the voters are going to tell us what this election's about. The smart leaders will listen and then govern accordingly. That's something to think again about. That's an October surprise. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Ballots hit voter mailboxes this week, and the stakes are high. Stay informed on Utah races for governor, U.S. Senator, and Attorney General. And, of course, the presidential election.
We have you covered.
With updates mornings and afternoons and conversation middays. Your voice, your vote 2024.
On KSL News Radio.
Hey, do you feel like you need a nap after your nap? Well, lugging around extra weight isn't just exhausting. It's also putting your health at risk. Here's a way to reduce your risk of obesity-related illnesses. SOTA Weight Loss, SOTA. No injections, no hunger, just amazing results that last. John Smith, you get up early just like I do.
I do, man. I get up at like 3:30 a.m., and by that I mean 4:30. But yeah, before I started SOTA Weight Loss about 6 weeks ago, I was dragging by the afternoon. But I've lost 30 pounds in 6 weeks.
And I let go of 70 pounds in 5 months. You get fast results, and the best part, John, is doing it without injections, pills, medications, or crazy exercising.
Yeah, no surgery, no side effects. It's just better food at better times of the day.
People will notice how you look different, and we've got the proof at sotaweightloss.com. That's SOTAweightloss.com. Go there, click request a nutritionist callback, and within moments you can start the same journey that John and I have found great success on, because SOTA is, say it with me, John, state of the art.
Hercules Credit Union has been helping you grow stronger since 1946, and right now they can help you take a look at your home. Low interest rates, competitive rates, the lowest they've been in years. You have flexible mortgage options, all kinds of products from fixed to adjustable, FHA, VA, all include options for those that might have less than perfect credit. If you're a first-time home buyer, all kinds of programs for you. The ability to specialize mortgage offerings with low down payment options to bring home ownerships within reach for you and for more people in our community. So check them out. Hercules First Federal Credit Union. Again, they've been doing this since 1946. You're never a transaction with Hercules. You are a relationship that matters as you grow stronger financially together. Check out their locations in Taylorsville, Harriman, or Riverton, or you can always find our friends at Hercules at HerculesCU.com. That's HerculesCU.com.
Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. So at Consumer Cellular, we're lowering the price for those 50 and up. Now you can get unlimited talk, text, and data for $30 a line when you buy two. That's just $60 a month for 2 unlimited lines. So if you're 50 and up, make the switch and save. Come on, you've earned this. Call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com today. Requires 2 lines of service, age validation, and credit approval, subject to system and area limits, taxes, and other fees apply.
Did you know your skin is the largest organ of your body? Huh? That's why you should shower with Old Spice Super Hydration Body Wash instead of plain old bar soap. Love your skin by super hydrating it with vitamin B3 and glorious notes of vanilla and shea. Did you know that my super hydrated skin is the second largest organ of my body? The first is my heart. Old Spice. Men have skin too. Old Spice Super Hydration Body Wash. 24/7 renewing moisture. With daily use.
The Management Minute is a service of the MBA program in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. I'm Professor Scott Hammond. I was riding the squeaking, moving sidewalk at the airport while the airlines were making announcements. A couple was having a loud conversation next to me, and the mayor was doing her Welcome to Salt Lake promo. Somewhere, someone was playing elevator music. Most of the passengers, as I did, had noise-canceling earphones to block the overdose of audible messages, reduce our stress, and retain our sanity. Not unlike today's workplace, too many important messages stacked on each other makes noise. They say silence is golden, but research shows it also leads to less stress and greater productivity. Good leaders create noise-free work environments where people can digest information and then move on. Learn more about how leaders create optimal work environments in an MBA program at Utah State University. Go to utahstatemba.com. That's utahstatemba.com. I'm Scott Hammond. Hope to see you in one of our classes.
Common Spirit Health. Hospitals, clinics, and caregivers all connected to advance healthcare in Colorado, Kansas, and Utah. Healthcare with human kindness is here. Hello, human kindness.
The Great Salt Lake normally drops about 2.5 feet over the summer. This year, though, it's down about 3 feet after some very hot weather. Second, Ukraine once again asking to use American weapons to attack targets inside Russia. And third, communities along the Wasatch Front hoping they can get their train crossings fixed so the trains can stop using their horns. 77 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
One of the most polarizing issues in American politics today is immigration. The rhetoric around migrants and immigration, the border, it's toxic. The attention is focused on who can use this as a wedge for political purposes, who can raise the most campaign cash off of it, who can use it in an ad against an opponent, whether that's in a Republican primary, a Democratic primary, or a general election. And rather than debate and solve the problem, all we have is this rhetoric. Everyone seems more interested in scoring the political point than they are solving the policy problem. Always a great day for us when we have Fiona Harrigan joining us on the show. She is the associate editor at Reason. She primarily covers immigration and foreign policy. Has a fantastic piece. You need to go read this. If you've ever hit your forehead saying, why can we not just solve the immigration problem? This is going to help you understand how we got where we are. And Fiona, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's dive into this. I love where you started your piece at Reason.com today because it goes back to 1982, Republican primary for the presidential. Just walk us through that because I think it's so instructive.
It's a really enlightening illustration, right? It's really, really interesting in how different it is from the situation we see today politically. It's this forum in April 1980, and it's Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush talking about illegal immigration. And they were talking in Texas, right? Super relevant to that crowd. And a questioner asks whether the children of illegal immigrants should be allowed to attend Texas public schools. That's where he starts his question. And the two candidates come at this in a really, really interesting way. Bush has this really cool quote where he says, "We are creating a whole society of honorable, decent, family-loving people in violation of the law." And Reagan suggests working out some kind of agreement to help these people come out of the shadows, right, to work and to pay taxes in the U.S. and to cross the border and essentially be welcome out of the shadows. So, comparing that to the way that the debate is framed now, not just in the Republican Party, but even in the Democratic Party increasingly, about how border politics is so toxic, it's so humanized back then, and it's really different from how people talk about immigration and the border today.
Yeah, I just love. Well, I always love a good historical reference, but this one was just so classic. It's like no one could say that in either a Democratic primary or a Republican primary. But it makes so much sense of, hey, what if we just had a way to know who comes in and who goes out and have a door that swings both ways and you could make all of this work. It's just so indicative in terms of where we've gone in terms of just the rhetoric of it all. I'm still one of those that believe we could actually solve probably 94% of this problem in an afternoon on the floor of the House and the Senate, because it seems like everyone agrees, but no one wants to admit they agree because it might not be helpful to them politically.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of why I started this article with this grounding anecdote, right? Because I think it's one thing to recognize and to observe that there are serious problems with border and immigration policy. I think that's pretty undeniable, right? Whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, a moderate, a conservative, a liberal, whatever. But the much more interesting question is why immigration policy and the border are so notably bad now. And I think a lot of people would agree that those areas are much worse now than maybe they were, or, maybe worse isn't the right word, but more filled with disorder and more difficult to manage. And the interesting question is, why is that the case now? But it's not something that people are necessarily interested in exploring. And that's why I thought it was so important to kind of go through the history of how these tools have developed and why migration patterns are so different now.
Yeah, and so as you look at all of that, and you always help us unpack all the proposals and the things that could actually work to actually make a difference in all of this, you pointed out in your piece that the first thing we have to just acknowledge is that the things that we're using, the tools, were for a completely different era, as you said, a different migration pattern than we see today. So kind of frame that for us to help us figure out, well, what is the conversation we should be getting to?
Right. So there are these three main factors that explain, in my view, why border policy is so unproductive now and why that's kind of enabled this debate to become so unproductive in turn. Changing migration patterns are the grounding of that. And this comes from a Migration Policy Institute paper, which is really, really good. And it outlines these two periods of border enforcement, right, and movement patterns in those two periods. So from 1980 to about 2014, it was mostly a question of single young men from Mexico coming alone for economic reasons, trying to avoid detection in order to work and better their economic circumstances. But from 2014 onward, it became much more of a question of humanitarian situations, right? People came with more complex claims for protection. We saw more unaccompanied minors and family units, those sorts of things, right? It's one thing to deport somebody right over the border back into Mexico and not have to worry about the legal situation that they might be claiming. When you have these families coming from far-flung places and filing asylum claims, that's much more complicated and it takes much more time and resources. So that's the first one. And then there are also these outdated policy tools. So our policy tools are still grounded in that first era, but they're trying to address the second era, and they simply can't, right? An enforcement forward and deterrent forward approach is just ineffective for that second group. And the last thing that I kind of identify as a factor is growing presidential power. And as Congress has kind of taken a back seat and formulating better policies and reforming the immigration system, it's been much more on the president to address these issues. Congress has been kind of complicit in that, right? They have cover for not doing their jobs and not fixing these problems. But then these presidents are increasingly seen as figureheads and as kind of the rulers, right? Rule by fiat people on the border, and that's just ineffective too, right? We've seen that time and time again. So these are kind of the factors at play.
Yeah, and so important to recognize all of those as Congress continues to abdicate its authority. The executive branch is going to take that. They're doing things by executive order, as you said, or by fiat. And that never ends well. It either ends up in the court or it just gets undone by the next administration as it goes back and forth. And give us just in our last minute here, Fiona, the other thing that you noted in your piece is just how the border and immigration, the system has really just become this dumping ground, like just point fingers, place blame, shrug your shoulders, not my job, it's somebody else's fault. It seems to be the receptacle now for anything that's going wrong has to have something to do with the president who's in charge of the border.
Exactly. And I think that's why there is this temptation to find an easy solution and to think that it has to be all about enforcement, all about whether it's building a wall or whether it's adding more agents to the border. It's not all about that, but people want it to be as simple as that answer because the border does involve so many things now, right? It's a question of national security. It's a question of economic security for a lot of people, of drug policy. And it's been really unfortunate to see all of those extremely complex issues shoehorned into yet another complex issue in such a way that people think it can be solved with an index card's worth of policy proposals. And it's unfortunate. And I think the two major parties feed into one another in thinking that it can be that simple.
Yeah.
So it's
I have a whole lot of index cards I'd love to ship back to them, but we'll save that for another day. I do want to have you back, Fiona, because I do want to get into this whole area of, gangs of eight and different bipartisan bills that have started but not quite made it. You also made some really important points in terms of the fact that this is expanding beyond just a Mexico or Northern Triangle problem. And we'll save that for our next conversation because I think that's also one that we're not talking nearly enough about. Fiona, as always appreciate your insight on this. Fiona Harrigan, Associate Editor at Reason. Check out her piece at reason.com. And again, Fiona, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Always have fun.
All right. Fiona Harrigan is the best when it comes to immigration, foreign policy, border. And her piece is so chock full of things that we need to think again about, and we'll think again about it with Fiona in the days ahead. We'll be right back.
It's 1:31 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. Lawmakers are looking at a bill that would increase penalties for child abusers. It would designate child torture as a standalone crime and enhance it to a first-degree felony. Dr. Toni Lasky helped to introduce the bill. She's a pediatrician who treats child abuse victims.
Broken bones heal, burns heal, bruises heal. Survivors of child torture will have years, decades, their whole life to work through what has happened to them.
The bill is in light of recent child abuse cases like Ruby Frankie's children and 12-year-old Gavin Peterson from West Haven. Lawmakers will take a look at the bill during this coming year's legislative session. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Voters in Georgia have shattered turnout records since early voting began in that state. Vice President Harris has been highlighting policies on her campaign that she says will benefit black voters.
I don't assume to have the votes of any demographic locked down. I have to earn their vote, and I'm going to work as I've been to earn that vote and to win on November 5th.
Former President Trump told a town meeting on Fox News that some state restrictions on abortion are too strict. Something will have to be done about them. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up on the day now 314 points, while the NASDAQ is up 46 right now. And KSL weather looks like things are going to change drastically tomorrow. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:32.
It's a priority for us at this station to bring you all sides of a story and to talk about the news fairly, completely.
Get all the facts and be really aware. Utah's Morning News with us, Tim and Amanda.
Weekday mornings 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
We were living in a townhome, renting at the time. We were ready to own our own house. Once we found a realtor, a world of possibilities opened up to us. We found a house that we really wanted, but we thought at first that it might be out of our price range, that we couldn't afford it. Our realtor was able to introduce us to state programs that help first-time home buyers, such as a state grant and state help to lower the interest rate. In the end, she made it possible so that we could buy a home.
Let an experienced realtor guide you. Go to myrealtorstory.com.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
If it's a door-to-door salesman, buyer beware. Hi, this is Jason.
And Kathy of Window World.
Answer that door and prepare for some serious baloney.
You know, overpriced, but on sale today.
Big special.
Manager's discount.
Model home in the neighborhood.
Remember, the sale ends today.
Hey, it's all baloney.
Window World's different.
Check windowworldutah.com.
Or call 801-281-8111.
Window World.
Simply the best for less.
And as Doug always said, that's no baloney.
This is the story of a very special woman. Just a few knew about her superpowers. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
What was that?
That is business phone bliss with the Ooma Cloud Phone System. It handles all our voice, video, and messaging needs.
You sound very...
Calm? I am. Ooma has everything I need to run my business more efficiently, like virtual receptionist, call routing, and video conferencing. And it starts at just $19.95 per month per user, plus taxes and fees.
Ooma.
Nice. Find your business calm at ooma.com/radio.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. And here's Ricky Meese.
No delays, but we do have an accident southbound I-15 prior to 6 North. Right now, a vehicle is off the roadway on the right shoulder, and we're still waiting for emergency crews to arrive. Prep for winter. Get a furnace inspection from a certified heating contractor to check for safety and efficiency. A reminder from Enbridge Gas. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Partly cloudy today with a high of 82. Much colder tomorrow with rain likely. Highs will stay in the 50s and 60s through the weekend. Right now we're at 79 degrees. It's mostly cloudy. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Political debates have helped build the American democratic discourse, offering voters direct insight into candidates' positions and personalities. Recent trends, however, suggest a significant shift in how campaigns view these traditional forms of public engagement. The decline in debate participation across various levels of government have really called to question the future of political discourse and, of course, the overall changes to media consumption and what the electoral dynamics really play out to be. Great piece the other morning in the early 202, of course, from the Washington Post, talking about these incredibly shrinking debate seasons as we look at that. And Theo Meyer, of course, is national political reporter for the Washington Post, and he's the co-author of the early 202 newsletter. And you should be on that list, by the way. It is a great way to start your day. And Theo, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be with you, Boyd.
All right, break this down for us. They are shrinking. Obviously, we've had debates about debates at the presidential level, and it looks like we'll be stuck with just one this time around between the two candidates. But kind of give us your sense in terms of how you're seeing this play out across the country and why.
Yes, you're right. This is the first year since, I believe, 1980, when there will be only one televised debate between the two candidates before Election Day. That is, of course, in part because at the first debate, it went so badly for President Biden that he was forced to drop out. But Kamala Harris has sought a second debate. President Trump has not agreed to a second debate. So it seems like there will be just one debate at the presidential level. And not only that, but this is the first year in a long time when the candidates have not participated in the debates traditionally organized by the Commission on Presidential Debates. They struck their own deal. So the question is what effect that is having now and will have in the future on Senate race debates, governor's race debates, House race debates, which far fewer people watch, but have traditionally been seen as sort of crucial ways for the candidates to engage with each other, debate the issues, really face each other one-on-one.
Yeah, and so as you look at that, obviously there's a down ballot effect to that. If the top of the ticket doesn't have to debate, why should I do that if I'm the governor or I'm a senator or a member of the House of Representatives? And so I can see that kind of trickle down. And Theo, is this just indicative of the fact that voters are consuming things differently, and so the risk-reward level for a campaign looking at a debate, maybe that dynamic has shifted? Or what do you see as the real driving force behind that?
Yeah, I think that is possible. There has been sort of norm breaking ever since the rise of Trump in 2016. He has engaged in the debates in 2016 and 2020, debated this year, even though he didn't participate in the commission's debates. But I talked with Frank Fahrenkopf, who is a former Republican National Committee chairman, the longtime co-chair of the Commission on Presidential Debates, who told me if they're not doing it in the presidential race, why the hell should we do it in a Senate or a House race? Kind of describing how campaigns might think about debates going forward in Senate races, governor's races, that sort of thing.
Yeah. One of the things you noted in the early 2002 was one exception to all of this, which I found incredibly refreshing and really intriguing, and that's New Hampshire. You've got a competitive governor's race there with former Senator Kelly Ayotte and Democrat Joyce Craig, and that they've actually agreed to 5 debates. What's going on in New Hampshire?
Yes, New Hampshire with a strong tradition of retail politics and is the most competitive governor's race in the country this year, really the only competitive one aside from North Carolina, where the implosion of Republican Mark Robinson has made people think that Democrats are going to win that one. So, yes, it's not that there are no debates anymore. There are still most Senate races this year, will have at least one debate. But in some cases, it's fewer debates than there were in the past. And in arguably the most high-profile Senate race this year, Senator Sherrod Brown's reelection race in Ohio, there's no debate scheduled, even though Brown and his opponent, Bernie Moreno, say that they want one. There's also no debate in the Florida Senate race, and in at least 9 House races, there are no debates scheduled either.
Wow. And so where do we go from here in terms of is it time to break the mold and the system? Do we need a different kind of format when it comes to debates that would entice candidates to say, hey, this is an important conversation, or this is a way to reach someone you're not going to reach, or a way to compare and contrast in a different way? Is there anything on the horizon to say, hey, we can do this different and not go from either a few debates or no debates, or just going to podcasters and social media channels? Is there a way to get to that kind of conversation that a debate should bring out?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. If you look at some of the races that have not had debates recently. One of them was the Arizona governor's race 2 years ago, in which the Democrat Katie Hobbs refused to debate the Republican Carrie Lake, saying that Lake was too extreme, that she was going to use the debate as a platform to, spout false claims about how President Trump won the 2020 election. He did not win the 2020 election. And that was a gamble, and she was criticized for refusing to debate, but she ended up winning that race. Carrie Lake is on the ballot again this year in Arizona. She is running for Senate, and her opponent, Democratic Congressman Ruben Gallego, agreed to debate her. They debated. There's just one debate, but in Arizona, typically in the past, there has only been one Senate debate. So it seems like at least there, there was there were no debates in the governor's race 2 years ago, and yet there was one in the Senate race this year.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. And, of course, we always go back to 58 and the Lincoln-Douglas debates, and it's kind of that grand tradition of that. You also pointed out the debate between Republican Vice President Richard Nixon and then Senator John F. Kennedy. I always marveled at that one, that there was only one podium. They took turns standing up at it to answer the questions. They each had, I think, 7 minutes for opening statements. Even that was a little bit of a different era for sure. But this is one that we'll continue to keep our eye on, and we'll continue to look to the Daily 202, the early 202 newsletter to keep us up to speed. Theo, thanks so much for making time for us today. I always appreciate your perspective.
Thanks for being on. Glad to be here.
All right. That's Theo Meyer, national political reporter for The Washington Post. He's the co-author of the Early 202 newsletter, and you should just get on that newsletter list. It's always full of great insight, great ideas, some things to explore, and some things that you're going to want to go back and read and do a deeper dive on a little bit later. Great perspective. We'll step aside for a quick break. More Inside Sources coming up next.
For over 22 years, speaking on business on KSL News Radio has been a beloved tradition, celebrating our heroic business leaders and Utah consumers who have helped build one of the strongest state economies in the nation. Now, under the stewardship of the Salt Lake Chamber and hosted by Chamber President and CEO Derek Miller, the program continues to shine a spotlight on those who make Utah's business environment dynamic and thriving. With his expertise and passion, Derek brings the stories of our business community to life. As part of the Salt Lake Chamber, Speaking on Business is proud to continue its legacy of highlighting inspiring stories, trends, and special guests. Support Utah businesses now and be part of Utah's thriving economy. More information can be found at slchamber.com. That's slchamber.com.
KSL Broadcast Group contests are open to participants 13 years of age and older that are residents of Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Nevada, unless otherwise specified. Employees or agents of the station, Bonneville International Corporation, or other area radio stations, or any entity associated with the contest may not enter. Persons who have won in the last 90 days from a station contest or event are not eligible. Full general contest rules are available at kslnewsradio.com.
An emergency can happen any second. Here's a few seconds to think about where you'd go. When you need medical care fast, the closest emergency room is a smart thing to know. Common Spirit Health ERs are your direct path between feeling scared or uncomfortable and feeling better. Find emergency care in your neighborhood at mountain.commonspirit.org.
Progressive knows finding your new home was a dream come true. You wanted a colonial with high ceilings, hardwood floors, and a peaceful neighborhood. And you found it. Now, every Saturday at 6 a.m., you get to wake to the sound of your neighbor's leaf blower. Progressive can't save you from your noisy neighbors, but we can save you money when you bundle your home and auto with us. Get a quote at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates and other insurers not available in all states.
Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. So at Consumer Cellular, we're lowering the price for those 50 and up. Now you can get unlimited talk, text, and data for $30 a line when you buy 2. That's just $60 a month for 2 unlimited lines. So if you're 50 and up, make the switch and save. Come on, you've earned this. Call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com today. Requires 2 lines of service, age validation, and credit approval, subject to system and area limits, taxes, and other fees apply.
Do you have an IRA or 401k? It's natural to think of this as being your money, right? But remember, you still have to pay taxes when you withdraw this money in retirement. And you could be paying a lot more in taxes on these accounts than you know. A lot more. Learn the strategies that can help you reduce or eliminate your taxes in retirement. Don't miss a special edition of Retirement Solutions Radio this Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, right here on KSL News Radio 1027.
Any Hour Services can help you make sure your furnace keeps you warm this winter. Whether you need a tune-up, a repair, or a second opinion about replacing it, call Any Hour Services or visit anyhourservices.com.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, the Utah legislature will be looking at bills that would create a new crime, child torture. Second, Vice President Harris says she can't take any segment of the population for granted. She'll have to work for every vote. And third, former President Trump told a town hall with an audience of women on Fox News that some state laws on abortion are too strict. 79 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, as much as we do through charity work, through government programs to help alleviate the weight of economic poverty for the American people, there's more to the story of poverty in America than just economics. And we've hit it many times on this show. Social capital, community, opportunity for social mobility, upward mobility is vitally important to address. And it's trickier for government to know how best to address it because it takes more than simply throwing money at the problem. It actually takes all of us. Kevin Corinth is a senior fellow and deputy director of the Center on Opportunity and Social Mobility, was part of a great perspective piece at Deseret.com talking about the need for us to face up to our social poverty problem. And Kevin, welcome to the show.
It's great to be on.
All right, let's dive into this. This is we often say that it's not just that connection to capital and money. It's that connection to people and systems and civil society that is so important. But give us a little bit of a breakdown. You looked at it from the context of what we're throwing money at in terms of helping people economically, but why we've got to look at that from a social poverty problem as well.
Yeah, so it's interesting. If you look at sort of the American dream, it seems like things are going pretty well if you look at material well-being. So poverty rates have fallen, incomes have risen really across the board. But what I think is ailing a lot of Americans is more this idea of social well-being or social capital. You know, are you strongly connected with a family? Do you have a church that you go to? Do you trust your community and civic institutions? And all of those kinds of measures, we've seen a real decline. And I think the reason we don't focus on this sort of social poverty problem is we just don't have a great way to measure it. You know, when it comes to economic poverty, it's pretty easy to ask people how much money they make each year and how much money they get from different sources. But it's a lot harder to ask about some of those social well-being questions. And so some of the work that I've been doing with my co-authors at the American Enterprise Institute is to create this sort of new data on social well-being that takes into account connections across all these kinds of domains of social life and ask how well people are doing.
Yeah, and let's unpack that because I think it's so fascinating to look at all of this. And what is it that you have been finding in your research in terms of that interconnectedness, again, through the community, family, religious involvement, social trust, all of those things? Give us some of the things that you've uncovered.
Sure. And so something that we already knew is that sort of social poverty has gotten worse. What we didn't know until some of the work we're doing is exactly those connections. You know, what are the factors among individuals that lead them to have more social well-being? So one of the things that jumps out at you is income, actually. So people with higher income tend to have higher sort of social capital, but only up to a point. So up to about $85,000 of income, sort of your social well-being and social capital is improving. But once you get to that $85,000 income level, it really levels off. Another sort of related thing is if you look at education. So those with a college degree have much higher levels of social capital on average than those with just like a high school diploma or less. That's not to say that everyone with just a high school degree or less has lower social capital. There's actually a lot of sort of variation within each group. But those are some of the factors that really jump out. I should say when it comes to income, it kind of matters what the source of income is. While it's true that as income goes up, you have more social capital, that's only the case for sort of earned incomes that you get from your job or other market sources. Actually, when it comes to government transfers, you actually see sort of the opposite relationship. That is, government transfers go up from things like food stamps or cash welfare or other kind of government assistance programs, which can be very vital for those who are suffering from material poverty. It looks like when you get more of that income, that actually social well-being is not going up. So that's sort of an important policy lesson, which, if we want to address not just our material poverty problem, but our social poverty problem as well, it can't be just about transferring more dollars.
Yeah, I thought that was such an interesting component to your piece, is that if someone is getting, over half of their money, their economic capital is coming from government or from those sources, as opposed to earned income that they're out working for from a job, that social connectedness is still in that poverty range. I think that's a really interesting correlation there, and really plays out the fact that you just can't throw money at a lot of these problems. That's not the way to actually help us build a society that really has both that interconnectedness, but also has that path to upward mobility.
Right. Yeah. And I'm someone who, believes in a social safety net. I think we need a floor, something for those who have fallen on hard times to get them back. But some of those programs have in them some of these pernicious effects on some of these really important building blocks for a more prosperous life. So marriage and strong families is one of the most important determinants of not only staying out of material poverty, but also for social poverty as well. But some of these government programs that we have, which are very well intentioned and needed, and certainly in some form, they can really penalize individuals from getting married. So if you're sort of a single parent, scraping by on a minimum wage job, working really hard to raise your kids, that's really important work. But it turns out that some of our programs, like the Earned Income Tax Credit and some of our other welfare programs, I think inadvertently discourage. They can really, if you get married, you lose a lot of those benefits, and that sets up really big risks for some of our more vulnerable individuals with kids. And so we want to make sure that we're providing that assistance, but also making sure that we're not inadvertently penalizing and making it really risky and hard to take those steps, like getting married or getting moving up the career ladder in order to become more self-sufficient and have those strong social bonds, which we know are important for overall well-being.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you raised that, because so many of the programs that, again, needed and necessary, but often we end up giving people exactly what they need to stay exactly where they are, and there's no real glide path. I remember having a conversation with someone who was all excited. They were talking to their social worker because they had just gotten a raise at their job, and the social worker said, you can't take it because you'll lose your housing and you'll lose your custody of your kids and all that, because there's no glide path out of those, and you really become trapped in that. And as you said, rightly so, that it creates these adverse risk elements that sort of trap people both in economic poverty, but also in that social poverty.
Yeah, exactly. And it really applies, especially those programs where it's sort of like you get it or you don't. So health insurance is another one too, like Medicaid, where, you really need, if you have kids, right, like you need health insurance for your kids. And if there's just some worry that you're going to lose that, I think that's really important. So it's not an easy problem to address. You want to target these forms of aid to those with the lowest incomes, but there are ways to mitigate at least some of these marriage penalties and just big risks and welfare cliffs if we're smart about it. And one of the big things we need to do is just consider all the programs all together. There may not be if you take one program in isolation, there might be only a relatively small sort of work disincentive or marriage disincentive built into that. But when you take the whole pie, all the safety net all together, there are some really bad consequences of the way it's designed, such that you really can discourage marriage and other ways to sort of rely on your broader family and community safety net that we really want to make sure we're preserving and strengthening.
That's my conversation with Kevin Corinth, and it's such an important one. We get so focused on the economic poverty piece of the puzzle, and rightly so. As Kevin pointed out, we have to have that safety net. We have to have those things in place for those who suddenly fall into that space. And yet, if we don't have a way for them to get out and to move forward, then we're really creating a long-term problem that does nothing to help the individual or the family. And so what happens is we end up with some of these programs, we end up trapping people. We give them just enough to stay exactly where they are and nothing more. And that's the big problem, because then we're treating people like liabilities to be managed rather than treating people who are in struggling times as human beings with real potential that can make a difference in our communities and in our society. And so it's that human capital, that social poverty that I'm equally worried about. Well, that wraps it up for us in hour number 1 of Inside Sources today here on KSL News Radio. We'll step aside for some top-of-the-hour news. Don't go anywhere. We got a big hour number 2 coming up. Nahal Tusi will join us off the top of the hour to think again about what we think we know on international affairs. You don't want to miss that. Stick around. We'll be right back.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. Trains have been blaring their horns at crossings along the Wasatch Front for 3 weeks now. Crews are working to repair railroad crossings that were flagged as unsafe, and that's what led to the horn policy. There's still no definitive date when the horns will stop. Until then, residents living close to the crossings have been upset by the constant noise. A music teacher at Jefferson Junior High in Kearns has launched a mariachi program to immerse students in diverse musical culture. Sam Noyce believes that learning directly from the source is the best way to do it.
So we had Mariachi Fuego de Utah, one of Utah's leading youth mariachi groups, come and perform for the school and for our mariachi students here.
Members of Mariachi Fuego conducted a workshop in the music room, engaging with students by answering questions and even playing a song together. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. More than 140 people were killed today in Nigeria as they were scooping up fuel from an overturned tanker truck. The vehicle exploded. The victims were burned to death. Authorities planned a mass burial for the victims. Deadly tanker accidents have happened frequently in Nigeria, which is Africa's most populous country. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up on the day, 337 points as we approach the close of trading. And right now, NASDAQ is up 51 points. Well, the weather's changing. We've got the wind now. We'll get the rain later. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:01.
Here's a way to get breaking news updates anywhere you go.
At the store or in a work meeting, you can get breaking news on your phone.
You can quickly read it, swipe, or click for more. It's super discreet, super fast.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
I finally decided a few months ago that enough was enough with the high electrical bills in the summer and the high heating bills in the winter, and it was time to replace our builder-grade windows of our 20-year-old home with the latest and greatest windows from Advanced Window Products. Ever since Jake and Nate showed me a demonstration of what a difference the right kind of window can have on my home's energy use, I couldn't get it off my mind. So my wife and I decided it was time. And man, am I glad we did. From the moment Ken showed up to give us a free in-home estimate, we've had such an outstanding experience through the entire process. Within an hour, we had financing set up, and then about 8 weeks later, the crew showed up and did what we thought was going to be a 2-day installation in a single day. Now our home is more comfortable. Our electrical bills have started to drop. We qualified for Energy Tracks credits to help pay for the windows, and we even took advantage of their expertise and replaced our sliding glass deck door with one that has a pet door built in. Look, I know you don't make a decision like this on a whim. You do your research. So do that. But make sure you call Advanced Window Products at 801-850-9100, and you can get a special deal of $3,000 off 10 windows or more if you mention Andy when you make the appointment. 801-850-9100 or go to advancedwindows.com.
Get up to a 30% upfront bonus to use for your retirement income or up to 12% per year to help grow your retirement income. Whether you're in retirement or will be retiring within 10 years, Trajan Wealth can offer some of the highest guarantees in the business. I'm Jeff Jr. with Trajan Wealth, and I know no one wants to work forever. We all need to retire someday, and I know you've worked hard for your money, so now is the time to guarantee it. Take advantage of up to a 30% upfront bonus for your retirement income or up to 12% per year for retirement income. Don't woulda, shoulda, coulda. Get up to a 30% bonus just for opening an account or up to 12% per year for retirement income. Don't leave your retirement to chance. Retire the right way, the Trajan way with Trajan Wealth. Call Trajan today at 801-899-7600. That's 801-899-7600.
Annuity guarantees are based on the claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company. DBA in most states says Trajan Wealth Insurance Solutions.
The movie show is at Minky Couture in Layton this Friday, October 18th from 10 to 1. Join KSL News Radio and Minky Couture and get special discounts and savings on your favorite Minky Couture products. And while you're at Minky Couture, check out all the ways to stay cozy and warm during these cold months, including the new Everywhere blanket. Join us this Friday at Minky Couture in Layton, 1782 Woodland Park Drive. MinkyCouture.com. Minky Couture, the best gift ever.
Jazz games are better together. Host an unforgettable night at Delta Center with colleagues, friends, families, whoever. Group tickets are the best way to get everyone together to cheer on the Jazz. Pick from a variety of options for seating, dining, and game day experiences. Start planning your big night at the game by calling 801-355-DUNK, emailing group sales at utahjazz.com, or simply visiting utahjazz.com.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
We've had a little trouble in traffic on southbound I-15 in Sandy. This is not far from 90th South. At first, I thought it was an accident, but a trailer has come loose in traffic from another vehicle pulling it. They did need to do a traffic slowdown to hold back everything and get it moved out of traffic, so it did cause some backups to 7200 South, and that's starting to clear. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Partly cloudy skies today with a high of 82, but it's going to turn much colder tomorrow with rain likely. Highs stay in the 50s and 60s through the weekend. And right now, 79 degrees, cloudy and windy. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
The Biden administration recently put sanctions on the Hilltop Youth, a group of extremist Israeli settlers in the West Bank. It marks a shift in U.S. policy towards the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And while the measures aim to address the escalating violence and occupation in the region, they raise some critical questions about the timing, the effectiveness of these kinds of sanctions and these kinds of actions. And so as we look at the situation in the West Bank as it continues to deteriorate, really threatening the viability of any possible path towards a two-state solution. It's time to think again about what we think we know in terms of the West Bank, the Middle East, and where the war in the Middle East will be won or lost. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, it's time to think again about what we think we know, and often when we go to this region, we turn to Nahal Tusi, of course, Politico's senior foreign affairs correspondent, and a great piece talking about where this war will be won or lost in Politico. You can find that at Politico.com today. And Nahal, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So let's dig into this. The sanctions, first of all, on this group called the Hilltop Youth, a group of Israeli settlers. Give us a little backstory in terms of that, and what is it that the administration is trying to do with these sanctions, and is this a needle mover?
Yeah, so the Hilltop Youth are a group of extremist, violent Israeli settlers who basically want to annex the whole West Bank into Israel, and they are known for attacking Palestinians, trying to stop humanitarian aid from going into Gaza, and a number of other things that have really alarmed the United States. And the sanctions, it's the latest in a series of sanctions that the U.S. has imposed on violent Israeli settlers. Over the past almost a year, every couple of months, they unveil a few sanctions on like a few people or a couple of groups or something. But it's really, it was unprecedented in the sense that the U.S. had really never done anything about going after violent settlers until this past year, until after the war began. But the question is, why didn't they do it sooner? Because they could have done it years ago. And it might have changed the political dynamics today, but they didn't.
Yeah, you mentioned in your piece that on one hand, it shows that there is a little bit of balance there in terms of the American involvement from both sides of the equation. But as you said, it seems to be a day late and a dollar short in terms of real impact there. So what is the next step look like, or what is it that you're watching for as we continue to see this play out?
Look, I think the question is, is a Palestinian state even possible anymore? And it doesn't look like it's possible in Gaza. And it's, the East Jerusalem was annexed by Israel a long time ago, although most of the world doesn't recognize that. And then you have the West Bank, which is kind of where the Palestinian Authority has some governance ability, but where increasingly there are Israeli settlements being built and Palestinians being kicked off their land and pushed out of their villages with really no place to go. So the question is, do you actually believe in creation of a Palestinian state? Right now, given what happened on October 7th of last year, the horrific Hamas attacks, most Israelis don't want a Palestinian state. And so the idea that they would, take it easy on Palestinians of the West Bank is just not realistic. But if the U.S. wants to lead, and if it genuinely believes that long-term peace in the Middle East involves having a Palestinian state, then it will need to step up its game to try to protect the last vestige of a Palestinian state in the West Bank. And frankly, these sanctions are pretty limited, pretty spaced out, pretty incremental. And even though I'm told by American officials that there's going to be more of them, that they're going to, quote, widen the aperture of what they're doing, the people on the ground are adjusting. They're shifting their bank accounts. They're doing things that make it less impactful.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the plan is, but it does not seem like the U.S. is really leading. It's just late.
Yeah, definitely late, and not a lot of vision there. And one of the things you pointed out in your piece that really struck me was this whole idea of hope, that hope of achieving statehood, and if the Palestinian people lose that hope, then the region really is going to remain unstable, and it will really be a place for all of that grievance to build up, and that always spills out in the form of terrorists or attacks.
No, that's true. I mean, you just, you nailed it. There's just going to be a lot of really unhappy, increasingly angry, hopeless young Palestinians who just don't see a political future, freedom. Increasingly, they're living under Israeli occupation. And they just, that's not a recipe for peace and stability in the long run for the region. And they're going to make their plight makes other Muslims mad around the world, and it just feeds extremism. It's just not been resolved, and the situation does not look good. And the thing about the Biden administration is, back in 2021, when they first took office, there were people inside the administration that said, we have to do something about these violent settlers. We should be imposing sanctions. We should be doing these things. But they didn't do it for a variety of reasons, including, they didn't want to destabilize the Israeli government. They didn't want to pick a fight. They always had a reason not to do it, including, frankly, just bureaucratic malaise and slowness and lack of prioritization. And if they had done it, it could have really sent a signal to Israel's extremists, some of whom are now government ministers. And if the U.S. had done this, maybe Israeli voters wouldn't have put these people in government. And now that they're in government, they're making it harder for everything from getting humanitarian aid to the Palestinians in Gaza to, wanting to expand settlements. So it's just been this whole thing where you look at when you look at the past and you say, what were the missed opportunities? Where could there have been a different fork in the road? That is one of them back in 2021. I don't know. I don't think that it would have prevented October 7th, but we might have been dealing with a very different political dynamic in Israel right now. Maybe the government there would be more willing to listen to the United States.
Yeah.
But we're not.
Yeah, and I think you pointed this out so powerfully, Nahal, that the fact that the administration has really kind of been in this, de-escalate, and do things slowly and kind of at the margins, thinking that's the better way to do it. And yet, as you've pointed out, it's actually made it worse because we're moving too slow. We're just tinkering at the edges and not really getting to the root issues. And at the same time, we're undermining our credibility and I think confidence on all sides that we can actually be helpful in terms of getting to a real resolution.
Right, and the impact is so much less now than it could have been 3 years ago, because Israelis are traumatized by what happened on October 7th. They're so traumatized. It's horrific, and the idea that they would allow a Palestinian state is incomprehensible to most Israelis right now. And so the settlements, they have more support now. The settlers have more free reign. The government's afraid to stand up to them, and it's partly because of this trauma. And it's just this vicious cycle that's just built on itself. And I don't know, man. How do these things end?
Yeah.
You tell me.
Well, I think it's going to take some bold leadership across the board on all sides.
Leadership. Oh, that's so interesting. Have you seen any of that anywhere lately around the world?
No, that's the problem.
There's a total deficit of leadership. I look around and I'm like, where are the leaders?
Yeah. It's so funny. We've had this conversation on so many different fronts, and whether it's dealing with the Middle East or even just funding things. When a company says, "Oh, we have a funding problem," or a higher education says we have a funding problem, I'm like, no, you have a leadership problem. All the other stuff is just extra, and it is going to take some leadership. And Nahal, we're going to look to you to help us find them and then put them to work. So,
yeah, that might be like a quest for the Holy Grail or something.
Well, we'll do it together. We'll link arms and we'll do it together. Nahal Tusi, Politico's senior foreign affairs correspondent, brilliant thinker, and a fantastic writer. And Nahal, we always appreciate you bringing us some great perspective and some terrific writing. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Take care.
All right, that's Nahal Tusi, best of the best. And I always appreciate her perspective. And it is a leadership problem. Bottom line, it's leadership on all sides of the equation, including the United States, including Israel, including the Palestinians, that in the absence of leadership, we continue to have these conversations at the margins, which do nothing except for embolden the radical elements on all sides and prevent us from getting to the real conversation. We're so far away from a two-state solution where we'd been close in some different seasons, and now we seem very, very far away. And it's one of those that if we do continue to water things down, that we do things to de-escalate, that we avoid the bold leadership moments, what we end up with is bigger problems down the road. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Yes, the 2024 election is big,
I approve this message.
but so much else is happening.
Possible property tax increase.
Construction along Bangerter Highway. Budget cuts could impact education.
We'll document everything on KSL News Radio. Start with Tim and Amanda, mornings from 5 to 9. Join the conversation with Dave and Debbie and Boyd Matheson middays. And get the latest on your drive home with Jeff Kaplan 3 to 7. We have you covered in your car at 102.7 FM.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Wilson with Any Hour Services, and there's a good chance you've heard me talking about our free furnace sale. The one where you buy a new air conditioner and we give you a new furnace for just the cost to install it, about $400. Well, we still have a few more spots on our schedule we need to fill, so I'm extending the sale, but I'm not quite sure for how much longer. Definitely no later than the end of October. And once I think our schedule's full enough, I got to pull these ads. So don't wait too long to call and schedule your free estimate. The main reason we do this sale is to give you an incentive to help us keep our guys busy when the weather's mild. And thanks to your help, we're able to keep our guys and keep growing. So if your furnace and air conditioner are ready to be replaced, you owe it to yourself to at least schedule a free estimate and get all the details about our free furnace sale. Just to recap, when you have Any Hour Services install a new air conditioner, we'll give you a new furnace for just the cost to install it. About $400. The furnace is free, you just pay the labor. If you think you might be interested, call Any Hour Services at 801-443-7400. You can Google Any Hour Services. You can even schedule online at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
At Macy's, we're proud to be local and support local. Carrying local products and produce is important to us. We are proud to support our local growers and bring peak freshness to you and your family. To make shopping local easier for you, we have added Utah Proud tags beneath local products. As you shop our stores, look out for the tags as you shop and show your pride for local Utah companies and growers. Thank you for shopping local yourself by shopping at Macy's. Macy's, happy shopping!
My name is Brian King, and I'm running to be your governor because Utah is headed in the wrong direction, and we can do so much better. If you're frustrated by politics today, if you feel like politicians aren't listening to you, if you're looking for something different, for a leader who prioritizes common sense and bipartisanship, you have a place with us in this campaign. Join us and vote for Brian King for governor by November 5th. For the better.
Paid for by Brian for Utah.
With interest rates coming back down, I bet the real estate market will pick back up in 2024. We're already seeing that, Tim.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter how the market is doing when you have the right team. So if you're looking to sell your house, now you want to downsize or you need more space, you need the Stern team.
The Stern team has taught us, I can think of a handful of things that I would worry about if I was buying or selling, but there are 100 details that are involved in selling a home, and they have lots of people that are handling every detail so nothing falls through the cracks.
And they have so many different options. I mean, I worked with Cammie there at the Stern team, and she was awesome. But if you need an instant cash offer, you can do that. If you need to buy before you sell, you can do that. They have flexible fees.
They also have people that they represent that are looking to buy a home, so maybe they can make that perfect connection within the Stern team.
So don't put off selling your house or buying a house because you think the market isn't just right. The market is right with the Stern team.
Go online to sternteam.com or just Google the Stern team.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, students at one Utah school were getting a lesson in mariachi music today. Second, 140 people were killed by an exploding tanker truck in Nigeria. Many were there trying to salvage fuel from the leaking truck. And third, rain on the way could help firefighters control the Yellow Lake wildfire. 79 degrees, cloudy and windy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Love of country has long been a cornerstone of American identity, shaping personal narratives and national discourse across the generations. Through times of triumph and turbulence, Americans have grappled with what it means to be patriotic while confronting the nation's complexities. During a volatile election cycle, the national admiration is called to question and invites each of us to find the balance between patriotic love and critical engagement with the challenges that are ahead of us. In other words, we've got to think again about what we think we know when it comes to patriotism, love of country, what it actually means in the context of our story as Americans. A fantastic piece in The Atlantic. Peter Winter, of course, is the contributing writer at The Atlantic, senior fellow at the Trinity Forum. And Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Beautiful piece. And let's just kind of walk through some of those components there in terms of where we've been, in terms of this love of country, this national identity in a pluralistic society. And then we'll get into the present reality. And more importantly, where do we go next?
Sure. Yeah. I would say in terms of, love of country and where we've been, that has been a characteristic of Americans throughout history. I think patriotism, rightly understood, is an admirable virtue, civic virtue, necessary, creates not just pride in country, but unity among people, and it provides aspirations of what people believe the country can be. At the same time, you have to recognize the mistakes that have been made, the sins that have marked the life of a nation and the people within a nation. And America's had plenty of those. Slavery has been called the original sin of America, and I think that's the right way to think about it. So love of country is both loyalty to country, but loyalty can sometimes argue for being supportive of what a country is doing, and sometimes it can argue for being critical of what a country is doing, because you want the best for the country, because you want to advance the moral good and human flourishing.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you framed it that way, because I think we have to get back to that. It's a warts and all, not just warts, and not just all the good, because if we don't honor the country by having the uncomfortable conversations, we don't get to have the future conversations. And I think that's where we're struggling at this point, is we don't seem to be able to have any of those kinds of conversations, either dealing with where we've been and the times when we haven't lived up to the principles we profess to believe, nor have we been willing to say, hey, wait a minute, I don't like where we are today, and that's going to inhibit our ability to move this constitutional republic forward.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, politics has always been passionate, a lot like faith. And so it's not necessarily easy to have elevated, important conversations where you respect the people you disagree with. I mean, that's just part of human nature. I would say that the time in which we're in now, the antipathy, the hatred, the unwillingness to listen to the other, the tendency, tropism to dehumanize other people is stronger now than at any time in my lifetime in terms of politics. And that's bad. It's bad for the country. It's bad for us as individuals. And so, it's one of the challenges we have is to try and get things back to where they need to be.
Yeah. One of the things I loved in your piece, you quoted our good friend Jonathan Rauch and how he's feeling about things in terms of not just faith and democracy, but just that part of us. I think a lot of us are sensing something's breaking inside of me. And you quoted Lincoln, and this is one of my favorite phrases, that we shall nobly save or meanly lose the last best hope on earth. And so how do we get to that? How do we save it as opposed to meanly, contemptuously lose it?
Yeah, I mean, there's no trick to it. It's, in self-government, it's we the people who decide. Now, in a country of 335 million people, you're not going to have all the population by any means to do the right thing. But there has to be enough people who care about honor and virtue and nobility and one another and the moral good to try and do better than we've done. And that happens in individual lives. It happens within families, within communities, within organizations that we're a part of. It manifests itself in what we say, in the votes that we cast, and whether we repair damage or whether we inflict damage. And there are a lot of organizations one can be a part of, and different things within the scope of one's life to be civically involved. But that's really what it requires. It's a determination, a commitment, an intentionality to be a person that lights candles instead of simply curses the darkness, and builds a country and rebuilds a country if necessary, and not to succumb to cynicism or fatalism, to give up, to give in, to say it doesn't matter, my vote doesn't matter, my involvement doesn't matter, that almost, I think sometimes people feel like they're like corks in an ocean tide, that they have no control over the toing and froing. And in fact, it's not how it works. So human agency, the belief anchored in a reality that we can make a difference within our lives, the lives of our communities, which ultimately makes a difference in the country that we're a part of. That's a very important thing to hold on to.
Yeah, I think it's everything to hold on to, and it is what we should have hope in. And as you said, it's not about being a fatalist or a nihilist. It's not about being an optimist or a pessimist. Both of those are not really rational. The optimist, it's never quite that good, and the pessimist is never that horrible. And so I do think that leads us to that space of hope, which is a virtue that we can develop. And I love your analogy in terms of that cork on the water. It's easy to feel that way, especially with everything that's churning and swirling around us. That's so negative, that's so filled with contempt and hate and anger and all those negative base emotions. Give us one last thought before I let you go, Peter. This is such a crucial conversation. Give us one last thing that you hope that today, that all of us, we the people, what is it that you would hope we would think different? What do you hope we would do different today?
One thing I think would be helpful, and I'm speaking to myself as well as to others, which is to try and enter into the world of those with whom we disagree, to learn their stories, to genuinely listen, to listen well to why they believe what they believe, why they believe differently than we do, an honest, genuine curiosity about others. That doesn't mean that you don't give up on your commitments, the ideals that you have. It doesn't mean that you agree with the people that you have deep disagreements with. But I do think that it helps civilize the conversation, and it also keeps us a little bit open to hearing more carefully than we often do why people are the way they do and what has shaped them. And the other thing is what philosophers call epistemic humility, the awareness that we don't have all truth ourselves, and that we have to be open to correction, refinement, being wrong from time to time. So to learn from each other, and iron sharpening iron.
I love that. Epistemic humility, radical curiosity, getting into the whys of all of that gets us to some pretty radical compassion in the process, and always leads us towards a more perfect union. Peter Wenner, contributing writer at The Atlantic, senior fellow at the Trinity Forum. You need to check out his piece today. If you don't read anything else today, go read this piece at The Atlantic, theatlantic.com. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. Fantastic perspective. We look forward to continuing the conversation with you in the future.
Thanks so much for having me on. Take care.
All right, this is Peter Wenner again joining us. Great piece in The Atlantic, senior fellow at the Trinity Forum. That's worth thinking again and listening again to. Check it out on KSL Podcast later on today. We'll be right back.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. Because of low humidity and gusty winds, there was a fire watch active on the western Utah today, but fire danger is decreasing tomorrow as a storm arrives, and that will bring a winter weather watch. Meteorologist Monica Traphagen with the National Weather Service says this system will bring much-needed moisture.
This will be, widespread mountain snow, valley rain, and that'll be quite beneficial in decreasing the fire danger and helping to calm down those wildfires.
Traphagen says we're expecting 1 to 2 feet of snow to fall in the Uintas, dropping temperatures below average for the day. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. With Election Day less than 3 weeks away, millions of voters have already cast ballots. In Michigan, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson has unveiled an online dashboard. It's providing real-time statistics to anyone about voter turnout trends and registration.
We've all seen the ways that data taken out of context can be used to distort the truth. That will escalate in the weeks ahead.
In Georgia, early voting is also running well ahead of past elections. Your money at this moment, the end of trading today, the Dow Jones average was up 337 points. The NASDAQ up 51, the S&P 500 up 27. And our KSL weather looks like the wind has arrived, if not the rain just yet. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:32.
News doesn't just mean information or dates.
It's the story of our local history being told in real time.
Be a part of the story. This is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
We hope to be a part of your story. We have you covered on KSL News Radio.
Did you know your skin is the largest organ of your body? Huh? That's why you should shower with Old Spice Super Hydration Body Wash instead of plain old bar soap. Love your skin by super hydrating it with vitamin B3 and glorious notes of vanilla and shea. Did you know that my super hydrated skin is the second largest organ of my body? The first is my heart. Old Spice. Men have skin too. Old Spice Super Hydration Body Wash. 24/7 renewing moisture. With daily use.
Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. So at Consumer Cellular, we're lowering the price for those 50 and up. Now you can get unlimited talk, text, and data for $30 a line when you buy two. That's just $60 a month for 2 unlimited lines. So if you're 50 and up, make the switch and save. Come on, you've earned this. Call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com today. Requires 2 lines of service, age validation, and credit approval, subject to system and area limits, taxes, and other fees apply.
Gear up for your hunting season with the Shields Hunting Sale event, running now through October 20th. Take advantage of great savings, like $300 off Vortex Fury HD 5000 rangefinder binoculars, $200 off Leupold VX5 HD scopes, 40% off First Light Cypher clothing. Get a $150 gift card with purchase of Seekins Havoc PH2 and discover so many more in-store and online. Save on your favorite brands now through October 20th at Shields and Shields.com.
You do countless things without a second thought to protect your family and home. Every time you're in the car, you buckle your seatbelt. Before the next load of laundry, you remove the dryer lint. When you head out, you always lock your doors. And one simple task, done far less often, can protect your family and home this winter. Schedule a furnace inspection by a certified heating contractor to check for safety and efficiency. A friendly reminder from Enbridge Gas.
When Dee and I build our new home, and it's almost been 10 years now, I think of all of the appliances that we put in that house, and I cannot tell you how many of them already we have had some major repairs and even replacements. You know the one thing that I haven't given a second thought to? It's the Connecticut soft water system. It is remarkable. We've had 2 systems in 2 different homes, and not once have we ever called with an issue to my friends at Connecticut. It's time for you to call Connecticut. If you're replacing an old system or if you're building a new home, whatever it might be, you will be amazed at how efficient the Connecticut soft water system is. For example, when your neighbor puts in 3 bags of salt in his or her system, you will be putting in only 1. It's remarkable how efficient it is. Give them a call. Great people to do business with. Call Northern Utah's authorized Connecticut dealer at 801-576-8600 or go to softwaterutah.com.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon, and here's Ricky Meese.
We already have traffic that's heavy and a little slow southbound I-15 between Murray at 53rd South, almost to 90th South Sandy. And we have crews that have just wrapped up an accident, 2100 South, 200 West. Teens can get up to $200 with a Teen Learn and Earn account. Plus, continue earning rewards as they master the essentials of finance. More at cypresscu.com/teen. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Partly cloudy today with a high of 82. Much colder tomorrow with rain likely. Highs stay in the 50s and 60s through the weekend. Right now, 79 degrees, mostly cloudy and windy. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com for Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today. As always, I am Boyd Matheson, and as we often say on this show, words have meaning and the meaning matter. And sometimes those words come in moments where they really matter, what you say matters. The power of language can help shape the course of events and change human history. And today we want to dig into one of those great events and some great words, the fall of the Berlin Wall and the subsequent end of the Soviet Union. An extraordinary piece in Deseret magazine. Ethan Bauer, who writes features, profiles, and explanatory pieces as a staff writer for Deseret magazine, has one entitled The Voices That Cracked Stone. And Ethan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Boyd. Glad to be here.
This is a brilliant piece. I was in and stuck.
Wow. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It was brilliantly written, and it is beautiful narrative and just important history. And so I want to kind of go back through this as we talk about, of course, many people know the phrase from Mr. Reagan, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. But you got into the story behind all of that. And just give us a little sense as you started going down this path as a writer. Describe that journey for us.
Yeah, so that's really, like you talked about in your intro, what we really wanted to capture in this story was the power of words, both from Ronald Reagan and then from the other main source in the story, who was a teenager at the time in East Germany. But as far as Reagan went, once we started digging into the speech and everything behind it and the famous 6 words, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, we knew we really had something interesting. It really starts with back in 1987, Reagan was going to Europe, mainly through Italy for an economic summit, and stopped in West Germany on his way back to the United States. And so most of his speechwriters were very focused on this summit, and so the duties for the stop in West Berlin fell to a guy who was very young, very inexperienced at the time, 29-year-old Peter Robinson. And so he got to join the president's advance team visiting Berlin before this speech. They were there to look at security measures, set up where the lectern would be and so forth. And Robinson, again, 29 years old, had never been to Berlin, wanted to see for himself. And so standing there where the president was going to speak, looking out at the other side of into East Germany, was so struck by what he called the almost literal oppression. You could almost feel it between the two sides. But his thinking for the speech really crystallized later that night at a gathering where he decided to ask some of the West Berliners there what they thought of the wall. And they basically told him that one person in particular pointed and said something to the effect of, I have a brother who lives 300 yards that way, and I haven't seen him in 20 years. How do you think I feel about the wall? And pretty much everyone in that room had a similar story. And so Robinson really felt like that was the story that needed to be told. That was what needed to be said. He got a lot of pushback from the national security apparatus, the State Department, because they didn't want to aggravate tensions with the Soviets at that time. But he really insisted, and his sort of saving grace was that the president himself had seen an early draft of the speech and really gravitated toward the part about tearing down the wall. A lot of other people had heard him say that that's really, what he wanted to say. And so whenever Robinson and his team got pushback, that was sort of what they used to defend themselves. If you don't like that part, you can take it up with President Reagan himself. And sure enough, Reagan eventually got pressured pretty heavily to drop that part of the speech, but he stood by it, and, the result was probably the most famous 6 words of the 20th century.
Yeah, no question. And I love how you got into that whole process. It's one of those things I always just cringe at. Doing anything by committee is rarely good, and in nowhere is that worse than creating a speech. We've seen that in State of the Union speeches, inaugural speeches, where it feels like it was created by a committee with all the different segments. And you had one line in here from Robinson, again, a young 29-year-old. And to me, this was everything, that Robinson had these strong opinions. But I love the way you framed it, that he understood that language had power and that sanitizing that power was cowardly. To me, that's an extraordinary statement. And I don't know if there's a truer statement in any of it than those words, that so often we soften things, we water it down, we do it by committee, and sanitizing that power really is cowardly.
Yeah, and I mean, that's one thing he's talked about a lot. His sort of basic point there was that the only way these other sort of forces in national security and the State Department wanted him to say something like that was in such a way where it basically made clear right away that, you know, he wasn't serious about it. It would completely take away the power of what he was calling for. That was the only way this, as you said, approach by committee sort of wanted him to frame this idea. And Robinson really pushed for being direct about it. You know, if we're going to say this, if he's going to say this, let's have him say it and let's have him really mean it. And Reagan himself was, you know, really in line with Robinson's thinking on that.
Yeah, and let's flip to the other side of the wall in all of this, because I love the way you wove these narratives together of what was happening with the speech writing and what was going to be the words that Reagan would deliver. And as you mentioned at the outset, this teenager on the eastern side of that wall. And give us just a quick snapshot of her experience.
Yeah, so her name was Bridget Schlick. She lived in East Germany about, I believe, 60 kilometers or so south of Berlin. She grew up never knowing a world really without the Berlin Wall. And, you know, she would go to Berlin fairly regularly. Her family took her there both to visit some of the museums and also to find a lot of the grocery items that weren't available in East Germany. And so she never necessarily felt like her family was doing without, like they were very, you know, poor or anything, but she always did get the sense that something was just a little bit off. And it really started to crystallize the older she got. She had a lot of pen pals from around the world and really learned about even West Germany or, you know, the United States, Japan, Norway, places all over, and started to sort of realize how different things were there, especially when her friends from those places would invite her to visit. And, you know, she had to turn them down because she wasn't allowed to leave East Germany. So as she got older, she and her father really started sort of a letter writing campaign to different government officials at the local level, at the national level, or even to the Soviet leaders, you know, trying to fight for different rights. She was very big on religious freedom as a Christian, a very outspoken Christian. She wrote a lot of letters about that. She wrote a lot of letters about sort of trying to continue her education, even though she didn't really buy into a lot of the sort of communist youth programs that were required to further education at the time. She ended up getting arrested for her activism, and shortly after Reagan's speech, actually, and she spent quite a while in German women's prison until the end of the Berlin Wall. She actually learned about the fall of the wall, I believe, the day after it happened. So she didn't even really get to celebrate it necessarily like a lot of people did. But in so many ways, right, she was very different from Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, the most powerful man in the world at that time. This was, you know, relatively speaking, powerless teenager who took it upon herself, nevertheless, to express herself and paid a pretty severe price for it.
Yeah.
But, you know, they sort of shared this belief, and what wove the piece together, what sort of braided it together, was that both Reagan and Bridget really believed that the power of words could make a difference and change things for the better.
That's my conversation with Ethan Bauer, talking about the power of words. Words have meaning, and that meaning matters. And we need to see more of it in more ways that strengthen our society, that help us move the constitutional republic forward. We'll step aside for one last break. Some final thoughts on Inside Sources coming up next.
This is Jeff Stout with Fink and McGregor, Mortgages Made Simple. There are lots of mortgage lenders out there, so why choose Fink and McGregor? Here are some good reasons. We are a broker. That means we can shop loan terms on your behalf, including loan programs, rates, and closing costs. We make it easy. We can take your application within a few short minutes, either on the phone or in person, on our fast application website, 4minutemortgage.com. We can help sift through options to find the best solution for you. This can include loan programs, credit fixes, or loan strategies. We are fast, really fast. Most loans close within a couple weeks. Start to finish, we are here for you. Apply today at 4minutemortgage.com. Fink and McGregor, Mortgages Made Simple, 801-264-9494. That's 264-9494. Or on the web at finkmcgregor.com, NMLS 289115.
Join KSL from 11 to 1 this Saturday at the Hot Tub Factory Outlet in Draper. Again, KSL from 11 to 1 at the Hot Tub Factory Outlet in Draper next to Cowabunga Bay.
We just want to have enough money for retirement.
And travel to visit our grandchildren.
I understand. That's why at Fisher Investments, we start by getting to know each other, so I can learn about your family, lifestyle, goals and needs, allowing us to tailor your portfolio.
What about commission-based products?
We don't sell those. We're a fiduciary, obligated to act in your best interest.
So how do your management fees work?
We have a simple management fee based on the value of your portfolio, so we do better when you do better.
We appreciate that kind of transparency.
We also check in with you regularly to keep you up to date on the markets and your portfolio.
Well, what other services do you offer?
As a client, you have access to resources on investing, financial planning, estate planning, Social Security, Medicare, and more.
Wow, sounds like Fisher Investments has everything we need.
At Fisher Investments, we're clearly different. Learn more at fisherinvestments.com.
Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Tim Jr. here from RGS Exteriors. I want to tell you about our famous "You Don't Need a Warranty" warranty. That's right, it's a warranty you don't need, but we give it to you anyway. Let me explain. Most warranty problems for siding, gutters, and windows are caused by not installing stuff right in the first place. If you rush the work, cut corners, or use subpar materials, you're just begging for problems later. At RGS Exteriors, we don't tolerate careless workmanship. We slow down, focus on every detail, and use only the best materials. We prevent warranty work by doing the job right in the first place. That's why the 10-year everything guarantee we give you is also known as our "You Don't Need a Warranty" warranty. We absolutely will be there if you need to use it. But honestly, you probably will never have to. Done right the first time. That's the RGS way. For siding, gutters, and windows, call 801-280-3110 or visit us at rgsexteriors.com.
You know, it's hard to believe that Dee and I have now been living in our new house for about 9 years now. You know, the thing that has really surprised me is how many appliances we have had to have work on and even replace. You know, the one that we haven't replaced, haven't done any work on at all, have not had a minute's trouble with, it's the Connecticut soft water system. And it's so interesting because when we were building the home, the builder said, okay, well, what do you want for a water softener? And I just interrupted. I said, wait, we're going to go with Connecticut. And they just smiled at me like, yeah, we know about Connecticut. Never once have we had an issue with our Connecticut soft water system, not only in our new home, but in our previous home as well. It just sits there in the basement, does its job, does it so much more efficiently than any other soft water system out there on the market today. Why don't you give them a call, 801-576-8600, or go to softwaterutah.com.
Tim and Amanda.
One of the big differences, I think, between reading a story online and hearing it from us, Tim, is that, you and I are allowed to share a reaction. We need to be able to say, what in the world were they thinking? So that people listening will know. We feel it too. When we read a story that sounds ridiculous, we're right with you. It sounds ridiculous.
Well, we get caught up, I'm sure just like our listeners do sometimes, in death scrolling on social media. And fact-checking it on your own is tough. The great thing about tuning in every morning and starting your morning with us on KSL is you can count on the fact that when that information comes out of the radio in your direction, it comes from reliable sources.
It's already been fact-checked.
Right. And that's not always easy when you're getting it online. Finding who wrote it, when was it written, has it been updated with the current facts of the day that change sometimes minute to minute, not just day to day. Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9 on KSL News Radio.
For over 22 years, speaking on business on KSL News Radio has been a beloved tradition, celebrating our heroic business leaders and Utah consumers who have helped build one of the strongest state economies in the nation. Now, under the stewardship of the Salt Lake Chamber and hosted by Chamber President and CEO Derek Miller, the program continues to shine a spotlight on those who make Utah's business environment dynamic and thriving. With his expertise and passion, Derek brings the stories of our business community to life. As part of the Salt Lake Chamber, Speaking on Business is proud to continue its legacy of highlighting inspiring stories, trends, and special guests. Support Utah businesses now and be part of Utah's thriving economy. More information can be found at slchamber.com. That's slchamber.com.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, we're going to switch from high fire danger to rain and even snow in the next day or two. Second, state election officials in Michigan have an online dashboard to provide up-to-date election results and to fight misinformation. And third, Nicholas Rossi was on the witness stand today, trying to persuade a court that he changed his name and fled the country because he'd been threatened. He's facing rape charges here in Utah. Right now, 79 degrees, cloudy and windy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today, as always. I am Boyd Matheson. As we round out the program today, a little over an hour from now, Vice President Kamala Harris will do a different kind of interview. We've been critical of both campaigns, only going into the friendly territory, and many of them going to places where they only get softball kinds of questions in podcast studios from very friendly askers of said questions. Today, the vice president is going to go on Fox News with Bret Baier. That will take place at 4 o'clock Utah time. In fact, I'm going to stay after class a little bit today to have a conversation with our good friend Jeff Kaplan as we go into that, because I think it's important. Now, why she's going into Fox News is really interesting to me. Does she believe there are some persuadables in there? Does she think there are some movables in there in these races in places like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, Arizona, and Nevada, where she can move the needle? Bret Baier is going to be professional for sure. He'll have some pressure on him from his own audience in terms of what kinds of questions he asks. But I think we should applaud that regardless of how you feel about someone's political philosophy. It is a good thing. I always remember in my time in D.C., then president of the American Enterprise Institute, Arthur Brooks, he was always trying to convince people, conservatives and liberals alike, to have a different kind of discussion. He would always tell everyone, go where you're not welcome. Get out of your comfort zone. Expand your horizon. Engage with the true believers, of course, but you also got to get to the persuadables, and you even have to get to the hostiles. Now, he wasn't saying go into places and pick a fight, but he is saying that only preaching to your own choir is no longer an option if you want to lead. And remember, winning a campaign is not leading. Governing is leading. And it requires you to go into places where you're not comfortable. And that's what he's suggesting, that true leadership requires a willingness to go into unconventional places, the courage to share principles with those who may disagree, and having the confidence to stand up and speak out, even in the face of overwhelming opposition. And sadly, finding leaders like that who are willing to go into the hard places is pretty difficult these days. Far too many leaders prefer to just stay in the safe and sanitized spaces where, of course, their political consultants and their staff can control everything. And, of course, in doing that, they prevent the leader from having any uncomfortable or potentially gaffe-producing moments. I actually think it produces a lot of gaffes when people get way too comfortable or give in to that temptation to go crowd surfing in friendly territory. Now, you've heard me reference in the past, I think, one of the best examples of going into those kinds of spaces. And, of course, it occurred on a horrible night in our nation's history, the night of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Bobby Kennedy, against the advice of his handlers and his security team, went to an inner-city ghetto to address an already angry and weary and devastated crowd. And then, standing in the back of a pickup truck, in a hostile environment, from scribbled notes, Kennedy delivered the news that Dr. King had tragically been murdered. And then he powerfully issued an inspired call to unity. Unity wasn't a slogan. Unity was an imperative. He wanted it to be a shared project. It's one of the most powerful speeches ever given. And it happened because Kennedy was willing to go into that difficult space. When he stepped onto the back of that pickup truck to address that crowd, he acknowledged what a devastating, dark night it was. But then he invited his listeners to join him in creating something different. Kennedy said, "What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but love and wisdom and compassion towards one another." Of course, his widow, Ethel Kennedy, was memorialized today after her passing, and it was one of those important moments. And sadly, speeches like Kennedy's are increasingly rare, where people just won't go where they're not just going to have that easy conversation with a crowd that's already cheering even before you've said anything. And so to me, we have to look for and we have to find leaders who are willing to go where they may not be welcome, to have the conversation in spaces where they may not only not be welcome, they may be discouraged from going. And there's examples of that. But there aren't enough. And so I applaud Vice President Harris for going into a place that would be deemed unfriendly territory. It's definitely not home court advantage for Vice President Harris to go on Fox News today. But she's going there, and we should applaud that. Who knows? Maybe it's the beginning of a better conversation. And so to me, the thing we have to get to is something William George Jordan wrote back in 1902 about going where you're not welcome. He said this. He said, "The reformers in morals, in education, in religion, in sociology, in invention, in philosophy, in any line of aspiration, is ever a pioneer. The reformer must realize that he must face injustice, ingratitude, opposition, misunderstanding, the cruel criticism of contemporaries, and often, hardest of all, the wondering reproach of those who love him best." So I think we are living in a time where we need leaders not just to go to adoring fans and cheering crowds, but those who will go where they're not welcome, who will go where they may be most uncomfortable, because that's where we're actually going to find the solutions to the real problems we face as a nation in principles and in good public policy. Well, that wraps it up for us on Inside Sources today here on KSL News Radio. I'm Boyd Matheson. Thanks so much for joining us today. And as always, as you go out into the world, make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts, and do something that makes a difference.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Good afternoon, 3 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Jeff Kaplan. Here it comes. The wind is kicked up 20 miles an hour, 79 degrees. KSL's top story. A twist in the case of a man accused of faking his death and fleeing to Scotland to avoid rape charges here in Utah. He took the stand in his own defense. KSL News Radio's Hugo Ricard-Bell live with the details. Hugo?
Jeff, Nicholas Rossi is now claiming he fled the US and changed his name because of alleged threats made against him and his family in his evidentiary hearing today.
I was informed by two reliable sources that there were two credible threats against my life.
Rossi told the court that he was not fleeing criminal charges.
Were you trying to evade any criminal charges or criminal cases?
Not at all.
Did you have any knowledge about this case existing at that time?
The case was closed.
On the stand, he also claimed to be a victim himself, saying he received a settlement from a lawsuit over abuse he allegedly experienced as a child. However, not many details into that lawsuit were given. Rossi was extradited to the US this year. He has many aliases and is facing 2 separate rape charges in 2 different counties in Utah. Hugo, reporting live, Hugo Ricard-Bell, KSL News Radio.
Thank you, Hugo. Yesterday, we told you that spurred by the Gavin Peterson and Ruby Franke cases, state lawmakers want to create a new criminal charge called child torture. This morning, they began the discussion.
The bill being presented would make a few changes. It would designate child torture as a standalone crime, enhancing it to a first-degree felony. It would also require anyone charged with child torture to serve a 10-year